que tu diriges par ce stand-là.
Ouais. Je pense que... Oh. I'm just waiting for everyone to arrive, but I think I can start. So, good morning, everyone, and welcome. Happy to see some of you here, even though it's a little early in my belief. Also, good morning to the people online. So here we are today on the session on the European AI Act. This year we're going even further. We're going beyond the algorithm. And we're going to talk about the future of market surveillance in the era of AI, and also on the topic, very important still in the years to come as well, support of AI innovation. My name is Jessica. I work for the Ministry of Economy, like we call it in Belgium, the Federal Public Service Economy. And in my department, we work on the implementation of the AI Act, and we have been working several months, if not maybe years already, on the establishment of the governance framework for the AI Act. And let me start by thanking Fotbosa for giving us this time space again for talking about this. Yes, and to having us again this year. Last year, I was also here to present you the governance framework. Right now, it is being formally established, and we were thinking about, okay, what can we do to not repeat maybe ourselves this year? And we were thinking, okay, next, this competent authorities, these future MSAs, market surveillance authorities, will start enforcing the AI Act, you know, when all relevant provisions enter into force. So what's next? What can we tackle now? And we have seen in these discussions we have had with the future MSAs, and also maybe more technical discussions, as well as discussion from a legal point of view, that, you know, this market surveillance will not be a walk in the park. We have encountered and determined some relevant challenges, so we will try to tackle them today. Maybe not find a solution already, but it's important to shed a light on this as well. So this will be the topic for the first panel in our session today. Then the second panel will will discuss the EU competitiveness agenda. We will also gather some challenges on creating favorable market conditions for innovation, and we will discuss whether the EU's simplification agenda can deliver on its promises. Maybe you have read it in the news, but the Council of the European Union has adopted a general approach on the digital omnibus on AI last Friday. And right now, this month in April, we will go into trilogues. So this is a very hot topic, let's say, at the moment as well. So having said this, we have this two panels. We will start and end the session with speeches by marvelous speakers. So let me just go ahead and present our first speaker, who is Gianfranco Cianale. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. He's team leader of the market surveillance service at DG GROW of the European Commission. Yes, I'm sure he will tell you more about DG GROW. So the floor is yours, Gianfranco.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for inviting the Commission to participate in the AI Week 2026. And thank you for inviting me to open what promises to be an interesting and timely session, co-promoted by the Belgian Ministry of Economy, on the EU AI Act, Beyond the Algorithm, the Future of Market Surveillance and AI Innovation. My name is Gianfranco Cianale, and I work as team leader for market surveillance in Unit H4, or Directorate General for Internal Market, Industry, Entrepreneurship and SMEs, DG GROW, at the European Commission. It's a pleasure for me to be here and set the stage for the two panel sessions that will follow, with some thoughts on market surveillance in the era of embedded AI, from smart product to smart oversight. I plan to start my intervention by providing some general remarks on the EU market surveillance system, shedding some light on the challenges that the system is facing, and dwelling on the current revision of the EU market surveillance regulation that aims at addressing them. I will then zoom in on the relationship between the EU market surveillance system and artificial intelligence, focusing on the relationship between the EU market surveillance and certain specific provisions of the AI Act, on the challenges that EU market surveillance authorities may face when ensuring that AI-embedded products comply with the essential requirement enshrined in the AI Act, and on the opportunities that artificial intelligence offers to market surveillance authority in carrying out their functions for the benefit of EU consumers and producers. The EU market surveillance system has a clear goal: ensuring that only products compliant with EU rules and values find their way on our single market. In today's geopolitical climate, achieving this goal is not optional, is essential and urgent. The backbone of the system is the EU market surveillance regulation. It sets obligations on economic operators, it grants powers to EU market surveillance authorities, it requires such authorities to perform appropriate checks on products on an adequate scale by means of documentary, physical, and laboratory checks. It contains disciplines applying to products coming from third countries to the EU, and established networks and groups for a coordinated enforcement of EU product law. The EU market surveillance regulation applies to more than 70 pieces of EU harmonization legislation, now including the AI Act. The job description of EU market surveillance authorities has been expanding over the recent years, together with the complexity of products and their supply chains. Along the other two pillars of EU product compliance framework, standardization and conformity assessment, the EU market surveillance system underpins EU's competitiveness by ensuring innovation, safety, and fair competition on our single market. A single market that remains our greatest asset with its 450 million citizens, a flexible regulatory framework, and a robust rules for safety, security, and the environment. But a single market that is also under immense pressure due to current geopolitical context and to the unprecedented surge in imports of non-compliant and dangerous products from third countries, particularly through e-commerce. Every single day in 2024, a staggering 12 million products enter the EU, totaling 4.6 billion in 1 year. This number has doubled since 2023 and quadrupled since 2022. The rapid growth of online marketplaces such as Temu and Shine has mirrored this influx. These numbers overwhelm our first line of defense, customs authorities, and our second line of defense, market surveillance authorities. In 2024, out of 1 million packages, only 82 were inspected for compliance, and only 13 were blocked at the border. As a result, the number of non-compliant products notified by member states in the Information and Communication System for Market Surveillance, ICSMS, has increased by 84% since 2022, while the number of dangerous products notified in the EU Safety Gate Rapid Alert System has increased by 50% since 2019. A vast majority of these dangerous products originate from outside the EU. The French authorities' actions on Shine are a stark reminder of the problem. This poorly checked inflow not only threatens consumer safety and undermines environmental standards, but also fuel unfair competition for legitimate EU business. The EU market surveillance is proving not to be fit to face the impact of e-commerce imports and other challenges. In our view, this is because the market surveillance system faces three major problems. First, there are regulatory loopholes making it difficult for market surveillance authorities to enforce EU product rules, particularly on online sales. To begin with, as highlighted in the evaluation that the Commission carried out on Article 4 of the EU market surveillance regulation, authorized representatives of non-EU manufacturer often turn out to be inexistent or fictitious, and in any event, bear no adequate responsibilities for product compliance. As a result, the market surveillance authorities, faced with the risk of product nonconformity, have often had nobody to turn to and to hold accountable in the EU. Moreover, in their role of provider of intermediary services, online marketplaces are not deemed to be economic operators and are not subject to obligations related to product compliance under the EU market surveillance regulation. Finally, the enforcement powers of the EU market surveillance authorities have at times proven to be ineffective and incomplete. This is the case of the power to request online marketplaces to remove content and eventually restrict access to the platform, which is procedurally complicated and rarely used. Sometimes, instead, the powers are already there, such as the power to require economic operator to provide access to embedded software, if necessary for the purpose of assessing the product's compliance with EU rules. But market surveillance authorities may not be yet operationally ready to execute them. The second problem is that there is an insufficient and uneven capacity to perform market surveillance actions in the EU, as the EU market surveillance system suffers from resource and expertise deficits. Customs authorities and market surveillance authorities struggle to carry out adequate controls and check, as they often lack the necessary resources and expertise to manage the volume and the complexity of products coming in. The resources dedicated to market surveillance also vary from member state to member state, resulting in an uneven application of rules across the EU that allows rogue traders to exploit the weak spots. For instance, in 2024, the number of product investigations notified in ICSMS database varies widely across the EU member states, from 1 to over 600 product investigations per million, compared to the EU average of 86 product investigations per million. The third problem is that there is an insufficient cooperation and coordination between relevant authorities within and between member states. A highly decentralized EU market surveillance system, with around 1,000 market surveillance authorities in the EU operating under different procedures and priorities, make this lack of cooperation even more relevant, hindering coherent enforcement of EU product rules. Market surveillance IT tools, such as ICSMS, are underused and not effectively interconnected with other national or EU databases. Finally, there is a limited pooling of expertise, insufficient follow-up to mutual assistance requests, and no automatic possibility to coordinate corrective or restrictive actions. With the aim of addressing this shortcoming, the Commission is taking both short and medium to long-term measures. In the short term, we are maximizing the use of all tools at our disposal. This includes continuing targeted enforcement via joint actions and priority control areas on high-risk third-country products bought online, scaling up the use of proactive web crawlers, sifting online product description and customers review for keywords hinting at non-compliance and safety issues, fostering interconnection between customs and market surveillance system, beefing up the use by member states of ICSMS, establishing new EU testing facilities for selected products, and carry out targeted enforcement activities and investigations under the DSA. In the medium to long term, the Commission will adopt a new European Product Act, a package consisting of and hosting revised rules on standardization, on conformity assessment systems, and market surveillance. The Commission is working to deliver the EU Product Act by the third quarter of this year, with public and targeted consultations on the 3 legal acts currently ongoing. The European Products Act will pursue its objective of strengthening market surveillance in 3 ways. First, we aim at ensuring accountability and a level playing field for all products placed on the EU market, in view of closing regulatory loopholes that undermine enforcement of European Union harmonization legislation as far as possible. We consider strengthening the disciplines of Article 4 of the EU Market Surveillance Regulation to ensure the existence of an EU-based economic operator responsible for product compliance for products sold in the EU. We're taking a fresh look at the role of online marketplaces in relation to product compliance. And we are addressing options that provides EU market surveillance authorities more effective enforcement powers. Second, we aim at scaling up enforcement by pooling resources and expertise of all national authorities across the EU. Third, we aim at improving cooperation between market surveillance and customs authorities within and between EU countries. Like the EU Market Surveillance Regulation, the provisions on market surveillance of the European Product Act will apply to the EU Artificial Intelligence Act, which is a union harmonization legislation. Yet it may be useful to highlight a few specific provisions of the EU AI Act resulting in specific market surveillance governance structures and practices. Let me just point to some of them. First, the AI Act regulates AI systems across sectors. This is key to ensure that AI companies can easily bring AI systems or AI components to the market, while only having to comply with a single set of requirements. However, member states designate multiple market surveillance authorities to account for sectoral knowledge. Many member states designate market surveillance authorities that already act in this role for other union harmonization legislation. But new market surveillance authorities are established for the areas listed in Annex 3 of the AI Act, such as law enforcement, education, and employment. Coordination between these market surveillance authorities is critical to ensure a uniform implementation of the law. Second, where an AI system is based on a general purpose AI model and the model and systems are provided by the same provider, the supervision takes place at union level through the AI office, which has the powers of a market surveillance authorities within the meaning of the EU Market Surveillance Regulation. In all other cases, national market surveillance authorities remain responsible for the supervision of AI systems. Third, the AI Act breaks new ground by requiring providers of AI systems to have a risk management system in place for the identification and analysis of the risks that a high-risk AI system can pose to fundamental rights when the high-risk AI system is used in accordance with its intended purpose. As there is no experience among market surveillance authorities with respect to this aspect, we encourage them to use the ATCO to exchange best practices on the supervision of the provisions of the AI Act related to fundamental rights. Ensuring an appropriate and effective enforcement of the requirements and obligations set out by the EU AI Act will require some adaptation and some time. The challenges surrounding the AI enforcement will require EU Market Surveillance Authority to rethink themselves to remain effective. New technology may require new methods. Checking the conformity of constantly evolving elements of products with embedded AI may be particularly difficult and will require innovative solutions. Notwithstanding these challenges, we already have a very motivated group of market surveillance authorities that have already been designated. The ATCO has kicked off in a very good spirit and with high ambition to contribute to a uniform application of the rules of the AI Act. And artificial intelligence itself is likely to provide opportunities for EU market surveillance authorities. It is important to note that the European Product Act will aim to fully embrace digital solutions across the board. In the future, the Digital Product Passport, DPP, will be integrated in the European Product Act, will allow access to all essential documents and compliance information required under the European product legislation, regardless of whether the products are sold online or in brick-and-mortar store, and simplify enforcement within the single market and at its border. This opens new possibility for EU market surveillance authorities to exploit artificial intelligence to speed up documentary checks related to formal non-compliance and to boost tools such as e-surveillance web crawler, assisting them in their market surveillance work. it will be up to market surveillance authorities to exploit the potential of artificial intelligence in carrying out their tasks. The EU market surveillance landscape has changed with the adoption of the EU AI Act and its entry into force in its entry into the family of EU harmonization legislation that is subject to the EU market surveillance regulation. And this landscape will change once more with the adoption of an European Product Act aiming to address the major problems currently faced by the EU market surveillance system. It is thanks to events such as this one that relevant authorities, economic operators, and various stakeholders may gather to discuss the impact of artificial intelligence and of new regulatory frameworks on market surveillance with respect to the AI embedded in products, and prepare accordingly to make the most out of it. In closing, I would like to once again extend my heartfelt thanks to the kind invitation to be part of this important event. As we move forward into the upcoming panel sessions, I'm sure the discussion will be fruitful, sparking new ideas on market surveillance in the era of AI and on the relationship between the AI Act and the EU competitiveness agenda. Thank you, and I wish all of us an engaging and productive continuation of the conference.
Thank you so much, Gianfranco, for this very insightful keynote speech. This has set the scene for the start of our first panel on market surveillance. I will go ahead and introduce our panelists and moderator. So first we have Laurent Winquin from the Ministry of Economy. He's head of unit, as well as head of the liaison office units within the DG for Quality and Safety at our ministry. Like I said, the service is responsible for coordinating national market surveillance authorities in Belgium. And in this capacity, he has also contributed to our work establishing the governance framework. So next we have Peggy Valke, executive board member at the BIPT, or Belgian telecom regulator, where she heads the legal service, HR, and NetSec departments. She is also part-time full professor of law and ICT at KU Leuven, co-director of IMEC CITIB and member of Leuven.ai. Last but not least, we have Nicolo Constantini, head of sector of the internal market and support of standardization sector at the European Innovation Council and SMEs Executive Agency. He is responsible for a number of projects on market surveillance, including coordination of joint actions between different member states. This very interesting panel will be moderated by Alexander Hoefmans, head of unit at DG Economic Relation, where I work, at our ministry, and he's also my direct boss. So the floor is yours, Alexander.
Thank you, Jessica. Yes, it's working. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone in the room, online as well. Happy to have you with us. We were very happy to have the Ministry of BOZA ask us to co-sponsor this session. It's supposed to be a session on the AI Act, and we thought rather than doing the once again a session on where are member states at in the implementation of the AI Act, we thought we would focus a little bit more on a different or specific dimension of the AI Act and the relationship with market surveillance authorities. And I guess the central question today, for this panel at least, is what does this mean for the market surveillance authorities? Taking a little bit a step back, and I think Gianfranco from DG Grow gave a very good introduction, scene setting also for our panel. We are here to talk about market surveillance. Why do we have it? Well, we have it for ensuring the smooth functioning of our single market, to protect our customers from, or consumers from unsafe products, and to make sure that business is not confronted with unfair business practices and competition. How do we do that? We monitor products. So let's maybe start first talking about the product, because products nowadays are no longer static products, or at least most of them are not. They are embedded with technology, sophisticated technology. So we're not simply talking about traditional toys anymore. We're talking about highly sophisticated electronic toys. And so what does this mean? What does this mean for example, the conformity assessment procedures done by market surveillance authorities? Maybe I can ask you, Nicolo, to take the floor first.
Yes. Yes. Thank you very much, Alexander. Good morning. Indeed, as you just hinted, and the products are now entering the market. They're of much more complex nature and also evolving and changing in the nature. I would like to start from what is the overarching framework, which is the new legislative framework, which is not that new now, but which set the tone for ensuring the compliance that needs to be respected with a number of requirements, and it does not mandate the technical solution that need to be used in order to meet those requirements. And also, as it was hinted, the requirements, the safety and the essential requirements need to be met not only throughout the life cycle, but throughout all the intended uses. So, keeping in mind the different levels of complexity, I would like to draw a parallel between the existing new legislative framework, which is also applied in quite complex equipment. I think about the machinery or the medical devices, and the importance and the need to respect those requirements throughout the life cycles, even with the potential changes that may happen in the appliance due to the use and to the AI embedded software, but also that the manufacturer maintains responsibility throughout the life cycle. When it comes to your more precisely on your question on the conformity assessment and how this needs to be made, yeah, it's not going to be easy. I agree to go to the physical facilities, physical location where those products are based and are in use. So would they need to have some creativity, and maybe EY will come into help to us? Can it be done remotely? Can it be envisaged a way to make the checks after a certain time the product is on the market? But I think there is still a need of reflection, but I would like to start and take as one of the main building blocks what we have in the new legislative framework and the provisions that are there and how they can be expanded and applied also to products with embedded software.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So I think the perspective of the life cycle of a product, of course, is quite key. The second aspect that you mentioned, the operational part, we will come back to that later. But so maybe passing on to Laurent, what do you think are conformity assessment products, procedures fit for AI embedded products?
Good morning, everyone. So building on what Nicolo just said, I think indeed it is important to recall that the AI Act was drafted on the basis of an existing blueprint, so a new legislative framework. But the real challenge is that this new legislative framework has been adopted back in 2008. So a time where artificial intelligence was not yet part of the regulatory debate, and actually even software was not yet part of the product regulation discussions. So while the AI Act relies on this well-established framework, it is also asking that framework to address new technological realities that were not foreseen when it was designed. So indeed, our conformity assessment modules are designed as pre-market checkpoint, so built around the assumption that the products are static, that the products are tangible. But when software comes into play, indeed, it can evolve through updates, through machine learning, then it is more complicated, and the risk profile of the product may evolve after it has been placed on the market or put into service. So it doesn't mean, indeed, that we need to abandon the new legislative framework. Its foundations remain solid, but it does mean that maybe we also need more dynamic forms of conformity assessment. In any way, we need a real paradigm shift. And this is also a good opportunity to recall that in September, we expect the European Commission to publish its proposal on the revision of the new legislative framework. And the Commission has already indicated its intention to introduce a more dynamic form of placing on the market, as well as additional conformity assessment modules, because the actual ones are not always capable to address our new needs related to the twin transition, or related also to the assessment of substantially modified products. And this is also an important part in answering those questions. It is, we need clear rule on substantial modification.
Okay, thank you. We will come back to the EU Product Act. I think it's going to be key in our debate. Peggy, would you like to add something?
Well, thank you, Alexander. Thanks for having me here. Good morning, everyone. I fully agree with what I heard before, so I'm not going to repeat that. The new legislative framework, while it may be time to modernize it, it remains a robust basis. This evolution from static products to dynamic products is typical for artificial intelligence, but also we also see it in the Cyber Resilience Act, for instance. So it requires a shift from the current conformity assessment procedures to more dynamic forms. But this is already, I would say, being embedded in the new legislation that we see, we've seen adopted in previous years. So the fact that this assessment, this monitoring will be a continuous process is not something that is unsurmountable, in my view, for market surveillance authorities. There's also, in the AI Act itself, a duty for providers to set up a system for post-market monitoring and develop a post-market monitoring plan. So that is also covered for. So we will need to adapt, but it is not a huge or insurmountable problem that we are being faced with. I think we can also have some regulatory agility in market surveillance authorities in order to cope with this more dynamic forms of products.
Okay, that's positive and a constructive attitude. Excellent. Laurent, you mentioned software. Are current market surveillance frameworks better suited to control AI embedded in physical products, or are they adapted also to the possibility of standalone AI software conformity assessments?
Well, I would say that actually both situations come with their own challenges and also advantages. For instance, with AI embedded in products, we have difficulties related to the cascading risk, but at the same time, we have also a better grip on the product, so a clearer entry point for enforcement. That being said, I would say that our current market surveillance framework is probably more suited for AI embedded in products, because market surveillance was historically built around the enforcement of tangible, of static products, and also the risk which impact physical characteristics of products. And furthermore, with standalone AI software, we also have difficulties related to some enforcement concepts, such as risk assessment, corrective measures, sampling also, for instance. So such concepts could become also harder to operationalize. But in any way, in any case, I think the real challenge for market surveillance authorities is to be able to evolve from supervising the static products to supervising more dynamic, more intelligent products. That's a real paradigm shift to make, and this is also why AI is not only a technological revolution, but also a governance disruption.
Yeah, indeed, and we will come to the governance later as well. Product monitoring entails monitoring risks. You mentioned it already, Laurent. Market surveillance is grounded in proportionality. The corrective measures stand in proportion to the level of the risk identified. But of course, with AI-embedded products, these risks evolve, the danger evolves. So how do market surveillance authorities deal with assessing the level of severity of risk in relation to a product that constantly evolves? Nicolo, can I ask you?
Yeah, as the product is dynamic and evolves, also the risk that applies to the use of this product may also evolve. And as a consequence of this, also the risk assessment may evolve. There are a number of tools that are available to perform risk assessment. Some of you may be aware with the Saga. However, I want to highlight, also as experience from projects involving market surveillance authorities of different member states, that even for static products, the result of the risk assessment and therefore of the measure to be taken, the proportionate measure to be taken, may not always be consistent and coherent among themselves. So what I want to say with this is not we cannot do nothing, but I want to say that risk assessment is an art. It's something between an art and a science. So it's also the expert judgment. It's very important. And what can market surveillance authorities do? I would say first is to coordinate and cooperate among themselves in order to ensure a harmonized and a consistent approach. But also, I think the added value of cooperation and coordination is in the benchmarking, but also the peer learning. As we are aware, not all national authorities may be at the same level of preparedness when it comes to market surveillance and the evolution of market surveillance. So what market surveillance authorities can do is to compare the experience, compare the knowledge, and to build this knowledge from the bottom up as a pillar and exchange. It will not be a walk in the park. They need to identify precise tools, but I think the way forward is really to have a more harmonized and consistent approach, and this can only be achieved via cooperation between the market surveillance authorities.
So there's cooperation, coordination on the one hand. You mentioned before there are risk assessment tools already available. I imagine these tools will have to evolve as well, I suppose. Are there examples of these tools?
Well, one is called SAGA, S-A-G, which I think stands for... I don't remember the acronym, but I can find it, and it's basically when you have a non-compliant product, it requires a lot of, a number of parameters to be included, and then you can estimate the severity of the risk. But the parameters to be included, the magnitude of the risk, that's also requires an assessment before, in order to identify I don't know how much we should go into detail, but risk is about the probability of an accident happening and the magnitude of the risk. And both of them, they need to be evaluated and assessed. What is the likelihood, the probability of an event to happen, and especially what are the potential consequences of the event.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Laurent, Peggy, do you want to add something on that? Yeah.
I think when it comes to risk management methodologies, we can learn a lot from what has happened in previous years in relation to cybersecurity. So what we're doing very concretely at BIPT is to put the teams that are in charge of the traditional market surveillance, so to speak, and radio equipment, together with the experts in cybersecurity, those who have been doing audits on the security of electronic communications networks since many years. We've worked with the Monarch methodology and the Serima platform. So by putting them together, I think we can come to fruitful cross-fertilization. Yeah.
Okay. Laurent?
I can also add that the main challenge indeed with AI is that it's fundamentally changed the nature of the risk we use to supervise, to assess. So traditionally, as market surveillance authorities, we have to deal with risks that are mostly physical, so mechanical failures, chemical risk, and so on. So those risks are observable, are measurable. Here with AI, indeed, we're also facing risk with non-physical impacts, so impacts on fundamental rights and so on. So the thing is, the danger is not always immediately visible, but our risk-based assessment will still remain valid in practice. So indeed, we'll still cross the severity of the potential harm with the probability that this harm may occur in order to determine this risk level, this risk category associated with the AI non-compliance. The thing is, we'll need to adopt how we analyze those factors. So I would say we need to broaden our understanding of risk in order to also take into account those less traditional forms of harms. And this raises a lot of challenges, especially since when risk assessment always involves a certain degree of subjectivity, actually. And even today with, for instance, the General Product Safety Regulation, market surveillance authorities are already being asked to broaden the risk analysis in order to also take into account social and psychological impacts. So I would say our risk assessments are under pressure because we will increasingly rely on specific technical competence. We also need to have other perspectives, social, ethical, societal perspectives. And also to pick up on what Nicola just said, we need also a lot of cooperation, of coordination between us, also cooperation with the European Commission guidance documents, and so on. So I think it is very important, and that will always be my key message: coordination, cooperation between us is the key. So we need to pool our resources, our capacities.
Okay, great. Let's hello. Yeah. Done. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Let's zoom out a little bit and let's focus on market surveillance authorities as such, enforcement regulatory framework. Becky, you mentioned it already. You mentioned ANT-Cyber, and you mentioned in the beginning as well the Cyber Resilience Act. What we see is an evolution whereby, on the one hand, we have regulatory frameworks being set up sectoral that integrate more and more software requirements as well. And on the other hand, we see a regulatory evolution of more transversal instruments like the AI Act or the Cyber Resilience Act, for example. So we are in a situation where or we move towards regulatory coherence or we move towards systemic complexity. So what does that mean for the enforcement powers of market surveillance authorities? Is this, let's say, mixed regulatory framework an opportunity, or is it rather an impediment to efficient enforcement? Becky?
My 2 cents are that depends on how things are being implemented at the national level. Whether you centralize certain powers into one institution or whether you have a multitude of authorities which then need to collaborate, coordinate amongst themselves. So I guess it will depend on the situation at national level, whether this works well or not. But with a lot of goodwill, and as Laurent said, and it's a recurring mantra that I also like to use or repeat all the time, we really need to pull resources together and coordinate and collaborate. So even with several authorities being in charge for different parts of the puzzle, if they get along well, you can have excellent results. If that's not the case, then you might have gaps or you might have overlaps. So for the moment, we haven't seen these pieces, new pieces of legislation into action yet. So I think it's too early to say it's too complex or yes, it will ensure coherence. It's too early to tell. We need to wait until we see results in the field, I would say. But
national level implementation is going to be very important, of course. It's quite complex to set up. Laurent, what about you?
Yeah, I would say that we are moving towards indeed coherence in ambition, but also towards complexity in practice, because yeah, from a policy perspective, this is not regulatory inflation, I would say, for its own sake. We have a real transformation of products of risk, But from an enforcement perspective, this growing set of rules create real complexity. And is also true for economic operators. Actually, we have now to navigate several overlapping layers at once. Sectoral safety rules, we have now horizontal AI, cybersecurity rules, horizontal general public safety, market surveillance requirements, and so on. So in theory, those instruments are complementary, but in practice, the real challenge, I would say, is operational articulation. So indeed, who checks what, when, on which legal basis, and also with which expertise. But I would say something is clear. The more this regulatory ecosystem landscape expands, and the more coordination, indeed, just like Peggy said, the more coordination, the more cooperation will be the decisive factors.
Okay, thank you. Nicolo?
Thank you. Yes, I would like to build on what Peggy and Laurent saying. If I may say, market surveillance is already complex enough when the products are simple. And not necessarily for the legislative framework, but because of the intrinsic process itself. And let's not forget, we're talking about potentially removing products from the market. And it's also a dialogue we have, or some dialectic process with the economic operator, the manufacturer importer, who may not always be the happiest person when you're telling that you're removing some products. So you may say, okay, I've done the test, the results show that the product should not be on the market. And usually the answer is, I have my test tell that the product is good enough. So for the market surveillance is a complex process in itself, and of course, having the more complex the products get, the more complex the procedure gets. But on this, I also think that market surveillance is not only complex, it is an expensive process because it's also the products you need to test. Usually you need to purchase them, and they can be of different prices. You need to make a certain number of tests in the laboratory. So the procedures to the process is time-consuming and resource-consuming. And on this, again, I don't want to repeat too much, but I think that really the way to make sure that we go towards harmonization and not towards divergence is really to coordinate between different member states and to learn from some countries that may be more advanced. It's, as I think it was hinted, it's not the legislation in itself that is incoherent, it's more the way it is then put on the ground at the national or at the local level. And that's where it's important that we also at the European level, we make sure that there is a consistent and a good practice that is consistently applied.
Okay, so national implementation on the one hand, but then coordination between member states, of course, on the other hand. The market surveillance regulation imposes on member states to have national strategies. We have one in Belgium, I imagine. Laurent, can you say something about that? Do they have a specific focus? Does it evolve in time? How does it work?
Actually, we must do now our new market surveillance strategy for Belgium. So it is a current process, and we try to have horizontal challenges between all the market surveillance authorities and also custom authorities. Because so if I may talk about my own role, we are also the single liaison officer for market surveillance in Belgium, according to the market surveillance regulation. So it is indeed one of our tasks to ensure delivery of this market surveillance strategy. And in our big challenges, we have indeed AI, cybersecurity, and so on. So the new regulation related to the transition, but we have also e-commerce and so on. But we will definitely also take into account those new challenges and more generally about the enforcement around software, because this is a situation much more complex than supervising tangible products, indeed.
And in that context, do market surveillance authorities dispose of sufficient enforcement authorities, powers, or are there in the regulatory framework still legal gaps? We've heard about the EU Product Act that will close certain gaps, I imagine. Can you say something about that?
Well, if I would say, for instance, about all the risk around AI, of course it is better than before, but I would not say that the landscape is also complete. We have still gray zones because, again, the AI Act is established on the new legislative framework, so it is a product regulation. So AI is here seen as software as a product, but it is only the visible part of the iceberg, because we have also next to this AI deployed as software as a service. And regarding the resources, of course, it is a big challenge, and I don't think many authorities can now say that they already have the necessary resource when it comes to AI enforcement. Actually, in an ideal world, we should have the right expertise, the right people in the right place. So to have this multidisciplinary team, I would say. So it is the key, but it is also the big challenge for us. And we are in a context of limited resource for public authorities. So in this situation, it will not be possible to build everything internally, and especially not from day one. So we need smart capacity building. So again, we need to rely in this parallel, to rely on the support of others to pool our expertise, because I'm sure AI enforcement cannot be conducted in silos, in isolation. So we need a lot of cooperation between us, between all AI supervisory authorities, but also with new type of authorities, such as the data protection authorities supervising fundamental rights, cybersecurity authorities. So it is very important to ensure this continuous dialogue and strong cooperation between us. And of course, they are so the people. They are also the tools we could have about software, hardware, and so on to help us. But I would say, in any case, the key priority is people. Before hardware and software, they do matter, hardware and software. Don't get me wrong, but without the right people, they are totally useless.
Okay, yeah. So enhanced and structured cooperation. It's becoming a constant message, let's say, in this panel. Peggy, you follow regulatory evolution up close. Do we have high expectations of the EU Product Act?
Do we have high expectations? Yes, of course, always. We always hope that the EU legislator comes up with high-quality legislation and solutions, yes. But if you allow me, I'd like to pick up on what Laurent just said. So your question started on, do market surveillance authorities have the powers they need today? And then we also move towards the resources. So on the first aspect, I'd like to point out that Article 14 of the current market surveillance regulation is quite broad. So at first sight, I mean, at this stage, we don't see what is missing in the toolbox. With that, of course, if there is room for improvement, we're not against that, of course. But I mean, at this stage, we think that Article 14, that deals with the powers of market surveillance authorities, is already quite extensive toolbox to ask for any kind of documentation, to do on-site inspections, to require from the economic operators what you need in order to do your checks and controls. Then the second element on the resources you need, I fully subscribe what Laurent just said about the people. First, you need to have the right people in place, because it's the right people who will also help us decide what we need in terms of software and hardware. So, of course, at BIPT, what we're hoping that we will be able to do in the coming months is to recruit AI experts with the necessary technical knowledge and expertise, but we're not necessarily looking for the top AI specialists. We need people who understand what AI technologies do and don't do, cannot do, but who are also well versed in what we just discussed, is risk management methodologies and approach, and who know how to do inspections. So we already have a number of people in-house that have that knowledge and that will be trained also in the coming months, but we hope to extend or expand the team. And what we've learned from our Dutch colleagues is that many of the tasks under the AI Act in terms of market surveillance can also be done by people who have an excellent motivation, not necessarily from the start the full technical expertise, but if they have the right motivation, they are extremely valuable assets in the team. I refer to the AI Safety and Security Lab of the Dutch colleagues, where a philosopher and an economist are in leading roles. So when we will be recruiting people in the coming months, we will have positions for AI experts, AI auditors, and AI project managers. And for the latter category, you don't necessarily need to have a diploma in informatics or in engineering. So we hope to have this multidisciplinary team, or to expand the multidisciplinary team that we already have in a limited form inside, in-house, sorry.
Philosophers, very interesting. But on the labor market, are these profiles, which are supposed to be very versatile profiles, because you're not focused on one issue, are we going to find them? Are they available? Or is this
the war on talent, huh?
digital competences debate lacking, etc.?
Well, we hope that the European Commission, if the AI office gets extra powers after the digital omnibus and will extend their team, we hope that not everybody will move to the European Commission. Of course, there are also the tech companies that attract a lot of interesting profiles. But like I said, we're not aiming for the top AI specialists. We want motivated people who understand the basics of AI technologies. And given that universities deliver more and more students specialized in this area, we had at KU Leuven, and I speak now from my own university because I know their programs best, we had an advanced master in AI since the 80s, which has now become a regular master. And here at VUB, they have a bachelor in artificial intelligence. So there are more and more specialized people coming on the labor market. So I'm optimistic that we'll be able to recruit the right people.
Maybe one more question for you, Nicolo, on the enforcement, but more on the side of not the market surveillance authorities, but the impact on SMEs particularly. I mean, are the future AI-related products and procedures clear and workable for SMEs? A lot of the new regulatory frameworks have particular focus on making it all, well, I don't want to say user-friendly, but I mean doable or not insurmountable for SMEs. What is your experience with that?
I will start with a disclaimer. I don't have close direct experience with in particular the impact on SMEs, but as a general principle, when the legislation is prepared and drafted, there is always an impact assessment, and that includes the impact that the new legislation or the changes in legislation may have on small and medium enterprises, which, as we know, are the backbone of the European economy in many countries. Yes, at the same time, we also have, I think, to pay attention to the fact that giving the impression that the products coming from small and medium enterprises go a somehow lighter regulatory procedure, a lighter market surveillance, that may risk giving the wrong signal, meaning, oh, but this product hasn't been tested as thoroughly as the product that is coming from a big company. So we have to make sure it is proportional and it's not an excessive burden. But at the same time, we have to make sure that there is not the perception that there are two layers of security, of safety market surveillance. At the same time, I would say that, including for SMEs that are maybe either entering or establishing SMEs on the market who have a niche product, as in the current geopolitical context we are now, where the imports are growing and may or may not be compliant, market surveillance is an important tool to protect the good economic operators. I would say those who really play by the rules. They don't want to cut corners. They want to. They pay attention to the safety of the product. So, the message I want to pass is that really the market surveillance is not done to penalize companies, but rather to help companies that play by the rules. Also, I would like to mention, since the EU Product Act, as it was hinted, will include 3 different pieces of legislation: market surveillance, on conformity assessment, and on standardization, and also linked to the fact that of the pool of expertise, that also the pool of expertise coming from working in other companies or in research centers can be useful for our ecosystem, since they may be involved in the development of standards. Standards are already very important, but are getting more and more important, including in the new legislation. And where I want to make the link is, we may have specialists working in companies, in university, in technicals, in research centers, that may be part of the groups, of the technical committees, of the working groups developing standards. And those standards, which standards are an important pillar of the new legislative framework, are also, so to speak, a helpful tool for companies, including SMEs, to get compliant, to give them some guarantee that the products are in compliance with the requirements of the legislation. So one element, sorry, I know maybe it was too long, but one element that I think it can be useful also in the near to medium future for the SMEs is also the evolution of the standardization framework.
Okay, thank you. Some good points, protecting the good economic operators, not having as a focus penalizing economic operators, moving towards the capacity of MSAs as well. Question is, do we focus enough, too much, not enough on the purely enforcement-driven role of MSCs, or should we also pay more attention or invest more into supportive and guidance-oriented models? I think this is the case for a lot of the discussion on AI Act implementation now, but I guess in general on on product legislation implementation as well. What do you think?
Guidance is never too much, if I may say, as long as it is approved and endorsed consistently by the different actors at the European level. So guidance is very important, and I'm aware that in all the different sector-specific legislations, there are not only the ad hoc groups, but you also have groups of the notified bodies, discussing the procedure to test the products, to certify the products. You have the groups also of national authorities on the interpretation of the legislation. So guidance, I agree, there is probably never too much of it. The importance of guidance is impossible to overestimate. So on this, I would like maybe to, I don't have really a clear opinion whether we are too strong on enforcement. I also think it really depends on, it could be on the national authority or on even the sector, that in some sectors there is sufficient guidance, in some sectors there is not sufficient, or maybe they could benefit from a higher one. What I can say is, because, well, yesterday there was here in Brussels an event with 17 categories of product tested, that, and also with the experience of market surveillance authorities in Belgium and in the other 26 member states, that it's, the market surveillance authorities, they don't like to play the bad cop. Usually they always go, that's my experience, in good faith to the economic operator. They say, okay, we found this, let's find a solution together. We expect, I don't want to speak, of course, but like the approach, we expect you to be as surprised and as concerned as us when we find something. So the idea is not to punish you, but to help you make sure that also the products you economic operator place on the market are in line with the legislation.
Thank you. I saw you nodding a lot. Laurent, what do you think?
Yeah, maybe only to complement and to be sure, I would say in any way the key priority would be navigability if I could say, for an SME perspective. So in this regulatory ecosystem landscape, which expands more and more. But indeed, in an ideal world, we could also make compliance as supportive as possible through guidance, tools such as regulatory sandboxes, and also help desk and one-stop shop support, things like that. But I think we also have to remain realistic in the fact that market surveillance authorities are already also under pressure, and we operate with limited resources, so we will not be able to do everything we want. So again, the need to pool our resources and capacity also with other type of authorities. And maybe also a good point is the fact that I think in the early years of the AI Act, of the application of the AI Act, there will be undoubtedly a learning phase also for economic operators, but also from market surveillance authorities, I would say.
Okay, thank you. Peggy, would you like to add something?
Perhaps a few elements. So let me start by saying that as market surveillance authority, you do post-market monitoring. So the primary role of a market surveillance authority is not to create awareness or provide guidance. The core of product safety legislation is that the manufacturer knows its product best, and so knows how to comply with the essential requirements, how to impose the technical standards. That's the core of product safety legislation. It's only when the product is being placed on the market that an MSA comes into the picture and can note that there is something not in compliance. So as a market surveillance authority, you never green light a product ex ante. It's your role comes after something has been put on the market, is being put to use. So that's important to keep in mind. And it's also important to keep in mind that, at least in our experience with market surveillance in relation to radio equipment and IoT devices, that the first thing you do is not to impose a fine if you find non-conformity elements that are not in conformity, but you enter into a dialogue and you see whether it can be improved, remedied. If not, then you have to take things from the market. But in many cases, it's a matter of clarifying the documentation, of remedying the problem, and fines are not necessary. So that's the first element to keep in mind. Having said that, our coalition agreement of the federal government foresees that in new areas like the Data Act, the AI Act, that the regulatory authorities should also take up this role of guiding the sector, creating awareness, and that's where the help desk comes to the fore, that is being foreseen in the act that is in the making. In addition to what the AI Office, the European Commission already has put in the market, if I may say it so. There is already help desk at the EU level, so the intention is to have something similar also at the national level, of course, without, I would say, creating unfair competition to the commercial services that are being rolled out for the moment by consultants and law firms. So we have to find a careful balance there, of course. Okay. We don't want to destroy a newly emerging market.
Okay, it's a message for the Belgian legislator. Point taken. We're moving slowly towards the end of the panel. I want to also give maybe some time to the floor for any questions, but a last dimension that I wanted to tackle was the governance aspect. I heard Gianfranco in the keynote say there are about 1,000 MSAs. It's huge. Here in the panel, regularly we have mentioned, okay, cooperation, collaboration between the different authorities is key. There is also, on the other hand, an evolution at EU level where, with new regulatory frameworks, we are moving more away from the national level implementation and towards an EU governance. We've seen it with the DSA, AI Act now with the Digital Omnibus as well. Is this an evolution that is to be, let's say, applauded? Is this a good evolution? Do we want more EU-level governance to be able to tackle some of the new issues, not only relating to product monitoring specifically on AI and software, but the whole e-commerce debate as well? Can we handle that? And is it better to have more EU-level governance or not? Who wants to take the floor on that? Laurent?
I can start. I would say that it is first and foremost worth recalling that the AI Act indeed already provide an original feature compared to the other product regulations. The fact that the European Commission, through the AI Office, already acts as market surveillance authority, so for a specific scope of AI system. And this is quite significant because market surveillance has always been a national responsibility in line with the subsidiarity principle. But actually, I don't think AI enforcement can be purely national. It is far too complex. I think the right model is a multi-level one, so we still need strong national authorities because enforcement happens on the ground. But at the same time, we also need strong European structures to complement the areas where a member state may face capacity gaps. So it is about combining the two properly, and also with European level governance, we have this advantage of ensuring a more coherent approach regarding market surveillance, and thereby facilitating the free movement of goods within the internal market. And we have also now currently the digital omnibus around AI, and the message is quite clear. I think in the Commission's proposal, but also in and especially in the Council mandate, we also reinforce this AI office role as market surveillance authority. And we are also establishing links with the role of the Commission under the DSA. So I think definitely that we are moving towards a stronger European governance level. And then we have also the future European Product Act, and one of the key priorities in this is also the possibility to have a sort of horizontal European market surveillance authority to again complement those areas where member states have faced difficulties, and especially indeed around e-commerce. But AI and other aspects related to digital or new regulation could also be part of this exercise. But of course, naturally, we'll need to wait for the trilogue negotiation around digital omnibus, and then also the negotiation with member states and so on for the future European Product Act.
Peggy, you don't entirely agree?
I don't entirely, because you said at some point a horizontal EU agency.
Yeah, in the European Product Act, yeah.
Okay, so I was going to say that what is being proposed by the Commission in the context of the digital omnibus on AI, and that is also supported by the Council, and today we will have the vote in the European Parliament, entails that the AI office will also be responsible exclusively for the AI systems that are based on AI models already within the competence of the AI office, if both come from the same provider, and the AI systems embedded in VLOPs and VLOCs, for which the Commission is competent under the DSA. That is something we can support. I think that's a smart move, because you make coherent packages, so to speak. I wouldn't go any further at this stage, because if you look at where the work needs to be done and the monitoring needs to be done, that is at the national level. Will the AI office send its inspectors to our ports and our airports all over the European Union? I don't think so. I mean, those are national officers doing the work. And okay, with online, with software, you can do it from anywhere. I agree, I admit that, but when I hope at least, that not all the AI systems will be produced and offered by large US or Asian companies, that we will also have local companies developing and putting these AI systems on the market. And there, I think that national authorities are the right level for control. So that's the first thing. Secondly, when it comes to centralizing powers at the EU level, I think we really need to be careful and do it in a smart way. I very much or very strongly believe in networks of national regulators rather than centralizing everything in Brussels within the European Commission. Because with the AI digital omnibus, a lot is being said in the press and in discussions on the substance, but nobody is looking at the financial annex, the budgetary annex. So whenever you give powers to the Commission needs more money. So where will that come from? Will there be a shift in budget internally? Will it be the member states having to provide for this, the sector? So there is not a lot of discussion on this financial aspect, which is, as a taxpayer, it's something that I care about. So to give an example of how such networks of national authorities can work well, since many years, our Dutch colleagues from RDI, they have been leading, setting up this network of competent authorities on AI. So there is already a trust that has been grown amongst competent authorities in AI in that context. A lot of them are now part of the subgroup of the AI board that deals with market surveillance, and that will function as the ADCO. And we've from BIPT also signed up to their initiative to set up a network of AI safety labs in the member states. So this shows that you can collaborate and you can join forces and you can have your own specialization and share that knowledge amongst the national regulatory authorities. So there isn't, centralization is not needed in all cases. It's a bit like blockchain. It was a hype for many years, but the core question that Bart Perendeel also, do you really need the blockchain for what you want to do? So do we really need centralization for the aim that we're after? I think that regulatory networks can also go a long way and will be perhaps more efficient and more...
All right. Watch out, blockchain in this house is important. I know from experience. Okay, conclusion, enhanced multi-level governance, let's say. I think we've exhausted more or less our time. Maybe time for one or two questions from the room. Yep. I don't know if we provide a mic or... there, and then, yeah, we'll take the two. Go ahead.
Yeah, hello. My question is about AI agents and the role in market surveillance. I'm working for the Brussels region, and we are doing a test for the moment in the urban department that is controlling the urban infringements. And there are 2 people working there, and we're doing a test with 9 different agents that are supporting them. To help on the infringement procedures. And so I was wondering whether in the market surveillance or other, well, at IBPT, for example, you mentioned that you will hire people. So do you also, well, could foresee in a sandbox or other feature that you would actually start using the technology that you're going to survey, so use AI agents to be faster on the ball. We don't say it in English, but yeah, so that's the question on how will you use AI agents? Because for the moment, the whole sector is buzzing about it. The whole well, economy is really changing because of that.
Right, question for Peggy. Smart MSAs.
AI tools will definitely be part of the the toolbox in the future. So in this network, competent authorities at AI that Dutch colleagues have been organizing since a couple of years, the first tools have already been tested, but for the moment they are not yet operationable or not yet deployable. But efforts are being put into developing that kind of tools, agents, in order to support the work of the market surveillance authorities, for sure. Yeah.
Laurent, would you like to?
If I may complement, first and foremost, more generally, I think AI is a very big opportunity for market surveillance. More generally, from better targeting to supporting more administrative tasks. So, for instance, it can help us with document analysis, online monitoring, prioritization, and so on. So I think more generally, we should definitively use AI as market surveillance authorities, but of course carefully and with the relevant safeguards. Otherwise, we risk reproducing the governance problems we are supposed to supervise. Then coming back on the European Product Act, this is also one of the key priorities to ensure that the market surveillance authorities will have the digital tools available in the future to help them in their work. And actually, even now, we have some tools, European tools, such as the e-surveillance web crawlers and so on. So we try to apply them. Sometimes it is quite challenging, but of course, we have to adapt to the reality of today, and we also need to be smart market surveillance authorities. So I definitely say that, of course, we need to use such tools in the future. And AI agents, it could also be a very good idea for the future to develop our own AI agents for market surveillance. Of course, again, it is challenging, but we will try to do it in the future. With colleagues, it is also one of our big ambitions, indeed.
All right, thank you. Very good question. Second and last question over there, sir.
Hello, guys. Good morning, guys. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was very awesome. My name is Moise. I'm coming from New York, where we don't talk anymore about the regulations. They have been removed. So I heard a lot about risk assessment. That's fine, very fantastic. But there's a way now, companies and people like you, we can make those risk assessments without knowing how to code. It takes 3 minutes, 5 minutes. So, Ms. Peggy, my question is to you. If you need somebody who can help you to make that risk assessment, you don't know how to code, I'm here for that. So
wonderful.
So you don't need to wear a student after graduations. It's too far. I'm coming from that. So that's my question.
But it was not only coding that she needed, I think.
Yeah, because she
we
said
need multiple profiles, but keep an eye out for our vacancies, and it's fun to work at BIPT, definitely.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you to everybody from the panel. Very interesting discussion. We have, I think, about a 15-minute coffee break now, and see you later. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. I think it's good.
Hello. Yeah, it works. Works.
So welcome back, everyone. I hope you had all a very useful break, maybe. Maybe you handed out your job applications, I don't know. But now we are going into the second panel. But before doing that, we have somebody from the, excuse me, I will search for the name, from the AI office who will be introducing the second panel. It's Antoine Alexandre André. He is a lead member of the European AI Office team in charge of AI innovation and policy coordination. He was strongly involved, it will take a minute here, biography, in the design and implementation of the AI Act, also the CHIPS Act, the Coordinated Plan on AI, and the AI Innovation Package. And more recently, he was the primary staff drafter of the Apply AI strategy and also the AI Continent Action Plan. So the floor is yours, Alex. Yes.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's nice to be back, actually, in this European AI Week, organized by a couple of people that I want first to thank. I think it's always great to take every year the time to assess where we stand and what are actually the next steps needed at European level to become this famous AI continent that Europe wants to become. I have the difficult task to actually remotivate you after this very interesting but very detailed actually panel on market surveillance authority. So here we will take a bit of a step back and broaden up a bit the perspective, looking as well at the competitiveness aspects, because, and that's very important, we hear a lot about the AI Act, but actually from 2018 onwards, the European Union and the European Commission and the different member states have been actually working as well on supporting innovation and competitiveness of our European companies. And today, actually, my aim, if it works, yes, is to disentangle a statement that I have been hearing for years and years and years, which is these kinds of sentences which are too generalistic, but still very much used on a daily basis by third jurisdictions around the world, which is the US innovates, China replicates, and Europe's, the small Europe's, they always regulate. So today, actually, I want to tell you that first, it's not true, and to take a step back to explain actually why it's not true and why we collectively should take back control of the narrative which is out there and which is very detrimental as well for our own European companies. So first, I have been actually around in European policymaking for a while now. I have been working for the European AI Office, but before that as well, before the creation of the AI Office, I was involved in the making of the European approach to AI in the Commission. So before the AI Office, there was already teams working, one team in particular working in the preparation of what will become the triptych policies that are now the mature policy framework to AI in Europe. And so we actually, since 2018 in the Commission, have been very much working with the community, with the companies, with civil society organizations to try to understand how to deal with the AI technologies, and mostly how to deal with the new versions that of these AI technologies that actually appeared since the second half of the 2000s, and which have been, I think as well, very much part of the debate since November 2022 and the mainstreaming of general purpose AI systems such as ChatGPT. We are very much in what we call now the maturation phase. We have learned a lot. It's been a while we have been discussing, we have been preparing, we have been designing, we have been discussing the policy actions to be taken in order for Europe to be both a continent that protects but also supports the developments and deployment of AI technologies. And today I will mostly talk about the three main documents. I already referred back to the triptych, which are very much setting the tone for the way we are considering AI for the coming years at European Union level. The AI Act, as you probably all know of, the AI Continent Action Plan, and the Apply AI Strategy. But first, let me go back to a baseline assumption that exists at European level since 2020 and the publication of the white paper on AI, so a document of the Commission, which is for Europe to actually become that supporting and protecting continent, we need to focus on two sides of one main coin, which are, first, we need to create an ecosystem of trust, and second, and this is very much happening at the same time, we need to support the creation of an ecosystem of excellence. And actually, all the different documents that started from 2020 and that have been published by the European Commission and by European Union overall are following this baseline assumption of supporting both an ecosystem of trust and an ecosystem of excellence. Now, the triptych, the AI Act, creating the right conditions for the establishment of an ecosystem of trust. I will go quickly. I think this has been the particular attention has been given to the AI Act since 2021, April 2021, and the publication of the proposal of the Commission. It's a very important building block for us, and we put it in place in order to ensure that the demand side, so that people would be trustworthy, would trust the different AI systems that are put on the internal market. I think it's important, as it was discussed previously in the previous panel, to come back actually to the core assumptions that are put as well in the AI Act. And one of them, which was explained actually quite extensively in the previous panel, is that it's a product safety approach that we are taking in the AI Act, meaning, in short, that we are actually using rules and governance systems that already exist. This is done in order very much for the implementation to run smoothly. And we have discussed that actually there might be still problems here and there, challenges here and there, but still it's one approach that we took and that we defend with whole of our heart, because we are actually very much convinced that we can rely on this specific system, the new legislative framework that has been used in the European Union context for many, many years. A second very important assumption that everybody knows, but still sometimes in the recent debate I have the impression that it's a bit forgotten. It's a risk-based approach that we took. We do not want actually to put obligation on all AI systems that are put on the market, but actually what we want is to make sure there are sufficient rules, sufficient obligations for providers of those systems which are the more risky to health, safety, and fundamental rights. And last but not least, again, in order to support this two-sided baseline assumption that I mentioned before, it's actually a very innovation-friendly legislation, notably because it uses a specific governance system that is being already used for many years in the European context, in the internal market context, but as well because it proposes some specific provision that related to the support of the development and deployment of specific AI systems, including, notably, just to give one example, regulatory sandboxes, which are very much promoted and which are even obligatory for member states to set up as part of this legislation. I liked this graph. It showcases a bit a benchmark. It's not us that produce it. It's actually the Stanford AI Index, so an index which is created by an American university, Stanford, and which showcase how many legislation there are covering AI in the US. As you can see, in 2024, it was 59. I can tell you that in 2025, early 2026, it exploded. So it's important as well to remind ourselves, and I think a colleague from ESMIA actually did it quite well, that with the AI Act we come with a unified, harmonized approach. In the US, what we see at the moment is an increase, an explosion of actually specific types of legislation which are used to cover specific elements of AI technologies and which are actually also making it difficult for companies and in particular small and medium enterprises to develop on the US market. I will skip clarification on GPAL models obligation. It's a huge part of the discussion. What is important is that these specific obligations in the AI Act have been added following a specific political momentum, which was the mainstreaming of general purpose AI systems based on general purpose AI models, notably ChatGPT. What is important as well to highlight is that while it's a huge part of the discussion, actually the people which have to implement the obligations that relates to general purpose AI models are not the companies, the traditional companies in Europe. They are more the most advanced, which are certain companies in Europe, but which are mostly not referring back to most of the AI-related companies in Europe. So my main message is that while it is indeed an important part of the discussion, it's most probably do not apply to many of the companies that are actually doing AI in the European context. Now, the end of mid-2024, actually, end of negotiations of the AI Act, a lot of attention being put for two years in what we call the transition period on creating this ecosystem of trust. And the Commission decided to send a strong signal. And that's what we sent actually with the publication of the AI Continent Action Plan. The AI Continent Action Plan, which was adopted in April last year, is very much focusing on the path, the vision for Europe to become an AI continent in 5 of the main elements that are needed for AI development and deployment to happen in a trustworthy manner on the internal market. Those 5 key pillars are computing infrastructure, data, skills, regulatory simplifications, and last but not least, development and adoption of algorithms. Some of the key announcements of this AI Continent Action Plan as notably being on the computing infrastructure side. What we saw, when we were discussing actually with main stakeholders, main economic providers in Europe, was the lack and not just the lack of computing infrastructure, but as well the lack of specific architecture in terms of computing infrastructure that was not particularly developed for the training of the most advanced AI models. And that's why we announced on the computing infrastructure, notably the strengthening of the network of AI factories, but as well the launch of a new type of initiative called gigafactories, which would be to support the development of, in particular, the most cutting-edge advanced models in Europe, and mostly also covering aspects that relates directly to the topic of this week, which is sovereignty. On data, on skills, on regulatory simplification, we had a couple of announcements on data, notably initiatives like the data lakes, where economic provider will be able to put together some of their data without losing their potential rights, proprietary rights they may have on this data, but still in order to foster the developments of the most advanced and sometimes also specialized types of models. Skills, also quickly, but very importantly, it's covered also in the AI Act. For us, it's not just about making sure that we have the right talent in Europe, but it's also making sure that actually the right talents come back to Europe, because we have actually over the past years foreseen a lot of people going abroad, and what we are now putting in place in terms of initiatives are a lot of schemes to bring them back in Europe and to give them actually the flexibility and the interest to come back and bring their expertise on the European continent. But as well, and that's more broadly speaking to all of us, reskilling and upskilling initiatives. So here we are very much looking at the aspect of AI that is actually modifying a lot of the ways we are actually providing the different services or doing our work the way we now are doing it. So we need to reskill, we need to upskill ourselves, and so we have also been putting in place a lot of these initiatives to support that specific aspect. Regulatory simplifications, you may all know what it means. It means notably the digital omnibus, and not just the AI angle of the digital omnibus, but also, and most, I think, importantly, and it's sometimes also put a bit on the side, the data angle of the digital omnibus. We want actually our rules to be implementable and to be implementable easily by all types of economic actors, not just the biggest one, but as well our small and medium enterprises. And we heard from a lot of stakeholders that there were some gaps in the Data Act, for instance, or in the AI Act. And so we are very much targeting specific modification to these regulation on the basis of these specific requests received from the different communities. Last but not least, the top of the iceberg is, for us, supporting the wide-scale adoption of AI technologies among the different communities, but also among the strategic sectors or the sectors that we considered strategic for European competitiveness in the world, and the publications of the Apply AI strategy in October last year. The Apply AI strategy is the last part of the AI Continent Action Plan, but it's actually a dedicated part on its own. It starts from an assessment, from discussing with the different communities, notably the sectoral communities. We realized actually that the adoption levels, while everybody was talking about, even in 2024, the potential of the technologies, what we could do with it, and so on and so forth, still we understood that while these discussions were happening at a high level of perspective, there was a need to recenter the discussions with the stakeholder communities on concrete use cases, on concrete solutions, in order to very much support the adoption and competitiveness potential of AI technologies. Second major assumption or assessment made at the moment where we were drafting the Apply AI strategy is that compared to other technologies, actually AI technologies can be considered as general purpose types of technologies. To be able to promise, to be able to align with the promises that everybody or all the big players have been actually stating over the years of the potential of AI technologies, we need to rethink as well on the way our organization are developing, structuring their different processes, organizational processes, being manufacturing processes or selling processes, and so on and so forth. So there is a need for reflections to happen at each of the organizational levels to understand what are the exact needs, what are the exact potentials actually of those AI solutions for my specific company, for my specific sector, given as well the specific characteristics of my sectors, the potential rules that are in place, and so on and so forth. Last but not least, last assumption of the Apply AI strategy is that competitiveness gains are actually distributed very differently across sectors. We see that certain sectors considered strategic in the European context have high potential for AI technologies, but we see also that certain sectors are confronted with regulatory challenges when they are deploying AI technologies. So there is a need to take on as well these more sectoral approaches when it comes to supporting the deployment of technologies and when it comes to supporting innovation in specific sectors. The three main parts of the Apply AI strategy, the three main, I would say, paradigm changes that we brought with the Apply AI strategy, making more links between the supply and the demand side, are first a change of perspectives that relates to the general purpose natures of AI technologies, which are related to what we called the promotion of an AI-first policy approach. Well, AI first, when I say that, people always react a bit strangely. Why should we put AI everywhere? No, that's not what we intend to do. What we intend to foster in each of European organizations is very much to reflect, and that's very much related to the general purpose nature of the technologies, to reflect on their core processes, to reflect on the potential of AI technologies to increase the efficiency of those core processes. And perhaps the answer will be, actually, AI is absolutely not usable in my specific context. But perhaps it might be as well that for certain sub-parts of an organizational process, it can bring those specific competitiveness advantage. Second major element that relates very much to this AI-first policy approach is bottom-up continuous processes. So what does that mean? With the Apply AI strategy, we started discussing extensively, putting around the table the different companies, but also AI solution providers, but also civil society organizations that are part of specific sectoral ecosystem. Actually, the policy actions that are part of the Apply AI strategy, they were informed by 17 of these structured discussion, where we were broadly bringing together huge amounts of stakeholders in order to understand what are the first concrete AI use case existing in specific sectors, but what are as well the challenges to the scaling of those specific AI solutions, most of the time European-made, that can be worked on in order to ensure that the competitiveness potential, but also societal potential of specific AI technologies could be scaled in a specific strategic sector. Last, but that's very much related to what I just mentioned, is the focus on those strategic sectors. So we actually focus on a definite number of sectors in order to start our activities. And here we look mostly at those sectors that are considered the most beneficial to competitiveness of Europe in the world. This initial list, is actually not closed. It's a first list, so it's going to be the first focus of the Commission of the stakeholders communities in order to also induce some spillover effects to those different other sectors which are not directly covered by the Apply AI strategy. In any case, this list of strategic sector will evolve over time. As I mentioned, it's a first step. We indeed will as well extend this list depending on the evolution of the technologies over time. So, as I hinted at, this last piece, this top of the iceberg, this cherry on the cake, the Apply AI strategy, is very much supporting the links between the supply side and the demand side. What we did with the AI Act was very much to support the creation of a demand for AI systems on the internal market by putting in place the right conditions for this system to be considered trustworthy by us, by our citizens. What we did with the AI Continent Action Plan was very much, again, to stress the need to focus our attentions on specific pillars of the AI value chain, and by increasing as well the European capabilities that relate to these specific pillars. So these two building blocks, the AI Act and the AI Continent Action Plan, are very much working on their own on the creation of an ecosystem of trust and the creation of an ecosystem of excellence. What we lack, and we actually brought at the end of last year, is the link between the supply side and the demand side. The link between those that are developing the European AI solutions and the communities that will be deploying those AI solutions. And that's what now is considered as our triptych approach. So in our what we call the maturation phase of the European approach to AI policies, it is very much then framed around these three elements that form the core of what we are trying to achieve in Europe with our specific values, but also our specific capabilities and specific expertise in the field. All of this to say what? All of this to say that a lot of what we hear is kind of a simplistic approach provided to the general public. When we are referring back to the sentence I mentioned to the on my first slide, we are referring back to a simplistic version of a vision of the world. Actually, Europe is very well placed to play a role. And by using that initial sentences, third countries are trying to frame a specific narrative about Europe. And that's very much what we are trying to counter these days with our dedicated European approach to policymaking. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Antoine Alexander, for this, I can say, passionate starting of our panel discussion. Very nice vision, and I'm looking forward to discuss this together with you, so you can have a seat. And my other panelists, Bianca Manelli from Digital Europe, and Danielle Wennick, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, from Orgalim. Yes. Please have a seat together with me. So, I don't think we have time to dive into everything which you just said, so we decided to pick out some points, specifically looking towards the broader question of European competitiveness in the age of AI. Something which is very top of mind for companies are, at the moment, the actions relating to the AI omnibus. As it was referenced already, work there is ongoing quite fast. I can say from my perspective that there were a lot of questions from companies coming on the AI Act, and with the omnibus, there is an attempt to work on a sort of simplification. Now, let's say the first question I want to ask is to Bianca and Danielle. Of course, first introduce yourself and your organization. But from your perspective, is the AI Omnibus delivering on the promises of simplification? That's maybe a first opening statement I want to ask from you. I don't know, Danielle, do you want to start?
Sure. Thank you so much, and thank you for the invitation. So I represent Orgalim, and that's Europe's technology industries. It's we're representing the biggest manufacturing sort of sectors of Europe, which includes metal technology, mechanical engineering, and electrical engineering. So typically machinery and construction equipment, and also advanced manufacturing with laser cutters, digital twins, and those sort of application, industrial automation, industrial robotics, etc. But I would say when it comes to the AI omnibus, that it's a good initiative. The stop the clock definitely helps for high-risk AI, and that you get another year. And often the intention is very, very good. And we can also hear from Antoine Alexandre André how good the intention is. And many other things also we're hoping when it's implemented will be good, but it's often, even if the intention is good, and we say high risk, it's only for some parts of the machinery, then in the negotiations, all of a sudden, you make one small change, and now there's a risk that you would have the sort of AI requirements for all machinery, even actually machinery that doesn't include AI. All of a sudden, the authorities will need to go through that legislation anyway. So then actually you're extending legislation on a legislation that already is working. So there's the new legislative framework with market surveillance and standardization and conformity assessment requirements is already working, is going to be updated. And for much of the AI application, NLF fills the purpose. AI has been integrated in machinery for a long time, and there are checks, there are conformity assessments. And it gets tricky, and I don't want to get in too much into the details, but you can often run into small shifts with the integration of AI Act and machinery regulation that you either have to make conformity assessments although you already done it, or there's not harmonized standards, which is very important as well, because if there's harmonized standards, quite often you don't need to make conformity assessments. So it's tricky, and the devil is in the detail, and it sounds not that much then if you say 10 to 15% are high-risk AI, but if we look at Europe's competitive strength, which is often still in advanced manufacturing, so for industrial robotics, not humanoid robotics, but for industrial robotics, EU still has an edge. And for many of the applications in the sort of advanced manufacturing on laser cutters, etc., it's produced in Europe. Much of the AI integration there could be considered high risk. So we're talking about products where we have a competitive edge that are very important and that we want to spread. And potentially we're making things a bit more complicated for them. So I'm all on board of not saying that EU are the ones that are regulating, but then that needs also to materialize in how the legislation ends up and what our members need to work with. And we're not convinced we're there, and typically in the Council we're more worried actually now than in the European Parliament. We don't see the Council moving towards more simplification in the current omnibus. Yet alone, there's very little on cybersecurity, and there's a lot of duplication there as well. So we are actually asking for a second omnibus focusing on cyber only, because we believe that is sort of lacking in the current scope. But maybe I start with that as an appetizer.
If I can summarize, let's say, good initiative, good first attempt, but there's the possibility everything gets a bit lost now in the trialogue discussions.
Yes.
Bianca, is that a view that you and your members share as well, or what are for you the key points on the omnibus? And maybe also, if I can ask you, add something which you really like about the AI omnibus.
Well, I think we really like, and we think it's very topical to have this stop the clock. I think this is something that industry needs. We are involved as Digital Europe, and also me personally, in the standardization process at Sensenelec. And we know, although they've been working on standards for many years, the novel inspiration of the AI Act, so such a horizontal framework that also integrates ideas that are related to fundamental rights, so not necessarily pertaining to product safety, is making the standardization process a bit more difficult than usual. There's also some different sectors that would fall within this horizontal framework. So we're seeing that it's taking quite some time to try to get the standards right. And this is very important for companies to be able to then actually implement this legislation correctly. So definitely we need to secure the stop the clock, because also what's important is once the standards are ready, it's not that they can immediately be implemented by companies. You know, they might need to change their processes. So I think something that our members said is about 18 months that it takes from the official publication of a standards to the full implementation and integration within their processes. So this is definitely something we really appreciate, and we think it's necessary to bring forward. I would say that we also share the view that there could be a bit more ambition. As Daniel mentioned, perhaps I take a step back. So as Digital Europe, we represent many different sectors. So we don't only have members that represent the digital sector, as you can imagine, but also many different sectors like health, healthcare, grids and energy security, finance, mobility. So we have a good overview of what the concerns are in different industries, and we know some of these industries are already very highly regulated. They already include in their current frameworks ways to ensure that the AI that is integrated within these products is safe. So we just want to make sure that there is enough flexibility to make sure that these requirements of the AI Act can be implemented as best possible within each of these frameworks, without in any way making it less secure or less safe. Of course, keeping the AI Act as the horizontal framework, as a maximum harmonization framework, but then giving all the different sectors a bit more flexibility to make sure that these requirements work with what they already have.
Yeah, it reminds me about, let's say, a quote from Alexander, I think, in the first panel. He says, yeah, we need to assure that we don't get systemic complexity, but move to regulatory harmonization. And if I can give my perspective, because I just noticed now that I haven't introduced myself, so I'm Jelle Hoedemakers, your moderator today, and I work for Agoria as an expert data economy, so on the topic of AI, data and cloud. And on a daily basis, at the moment, one of my main focuses is helping companies implement the AI Act, because you see that there is quite some attention going towards it. And the reality is that most of these companies in Belgium are SMEs. You see the real innovations are coming from these SMEs. And yeah, what they see there is a sort of regulatory fatigue happening, meaning they're faced with so many different regulations on AI, on digital, on cybersecurity, that basically they don't really know where to start. And then specifically, you also have the situation where you have companies who make physical products, that they have these product legislation, they have now a horizontal AI Act, and they don't really, let's say, know what to do with it. So that's a bit something I would like all of you to comment on, this regulatory fatigue, because, okay, in a real sense, I think it's there with a lot of companies. How can we avoid that? And how can we avoid this maybe systemic complexity that at least there is a view that is being created now in Europe? Maybe Antoine Alexandre. Yes.
Thank you. I hope it works. Yes. Thanks for the intervention. Thanks for the question. Regulatory fatigue. I think it's important to get back to one of the key assumptions of the AI Act, which I mentioned, so which is harmonization. So we want to harmonize actually the rules for the 27 member states. It's even worse for a company that wants to develop actually on the European internal market if it has 27 different regimes of rules. So again, stressing the point that what we are trying to achieve is very much these harmonizations of the rules. Also, the innovation angle aspects I mentioned with the standards, and they were mentioned before, is quite important. And that's actually one of the reasons why we are in the AI Omnibus proposing this stop the clock. It's because the standards are not ready. Though I need to stress, because standards are actually very close to my heart, I've been working on these, the making of these standards for quite some time. We in the Commission, we have been involved in Sensenelec and at ISO IEC level, so at international level, for more than 5 years now. So we have been saying to the world, we have been cooperating on a daily basis with the people developing these standards, that these would be the rules. And for 3.5, 4 years, I can tell you that the reaction was like, Huff, rules, they will never be adopted. So we have time, we have time, we have time. But we were stressing, we were saying, no, we don't. We need to put our brains together in order to have implementary materials that will allow faster implementation, in particular for SMEs. And that's also what I experience, is that, okay, sometimes, you know, a lot of attention is given on the cost for SMEs, but what I see is that the people which are making the complaints, the people which are not supporting, are the biggest companies. Because it's not in their interest, basically, to support also the making of these implementable rules. So again, here, we are trying very much with the Omnibus, also, again, to look at the perspective of SMEs, again, to simplify the way they are coping with the implementation of specific obligation. And still, I want to stress last point regarding as well this regulatory fatigue. Again, even if it's just a percentage, it's really important to understand that we are not covering all AI systems. considered as product. We are not covering all technologies. We are covering the technologies which are the most harmful for safety, but also for the protection of fundamental rights of us collectively. So I think it's very important for being able to trust the systems that we are using, that we have at least a minimum level of rules. Otherwise, you end up with actually players that do whatever they want on the single market.
Okay, strong statement. Anyone willing to do a reaction? Daniel?
Yes, sure. No, I can react a bit to that. Thank you for that. I would say that one key thing we often see with a lot of legislation coming out, especially in the digital area, it's our feeling is that legislators and often the Commission see these gigantic big tech companies and talk about defending fundamental rights, as you mentioned just now, and that's indeed it's a very crucial part. It's very, very important. But then when you see what is Europe good at, what are we doing currently, a lot of it is about AI integration, maybe in a machine that's used at one factory site. And for me, you could also come into a situation where, with the current definition, you end up with sort of seeing that as high risk because conformity assessment is set off as a requirement. And then I think that's not what maybe the Commission had in mind, but that in the end, even if you try to take a risk-based approach, you will have instances where that plays in. And then I think also I want to comment on the sort of SME against the big companies. I mean, about 98% of our members are SMEs. But of course, if we look in our working groups, it's quite often bigger companies or national trade organizations and European sectors that send their representatives. Of course, SMEs don't have the same possibilities to raise their voice. I'm not surprised if you often hear the complaints for companies. But that doesn't mean that it's working for SMEs. I think many SMEs just pragmatically try to solve things, so they get in touch with their trade organization, and then we are the ones pushing forward that message. No doubt, still on my side, intentions are good. Risk-based approach is a very good way of dealing with it. But then I think to really get to the risk-based approach and make it work, we need to go a couple of layers more and see indeed we have defined high risk, but are there not a couple of machines and components that end up being in that definition? And maybe that was not the intention from the beginning, and how much extra work do they get? And we're still working on that, and there's some small tweaks to do in the AI Act where the Parliament at least is suggesting to merging Section A and B and the next, but the Council is not there. And the Council is very supportive on Stop the Clock, so we're very positive about that, just as it is in Europe. That's a very concrete thing. And then there can be simplifications as well if legislation comes into the sector legislation. But indeed, it's a key point. You also, at the same time, you want harmonized legislation. So there's a small risk that you start developing sort of separate legislation in all the different pieces, and that also needs to be prevented. So it's a tricky balance there to be struck, actually. I can admit to that.
No.
Thanks.
All right, thank you. Bianca?
If I just may add something, I think the only real antidote to regulatory fatigue is the fact that there should be legal certainty and there should be enough time and also accessibility to these guidelines or codes of practice or all of this like corollary of tools that are necessary for a straightforward implementation of the legislation to be available to SMEs, because oftentimes we see that the guidelines are a bit delayed. There's not enough time to properly digest it, especially if, as an SME, you might not have like a 30 lawyers in your compliance team just backing you up. So I think that's also important, something that needs to be mentioned.
Yeah, I didn't think you referenced the amount of guidelines that the office is still working on, so it's something indeed which can help. Maybe to touch on another topic, a bit more related to the first panel we had on the market surveillance around, let's say, this whole system. So for me, it was very positive to hear all the challenges the market surveillance is having. Why? Because we are facing these same challenges, and we're faced with a very complex, fast-moving technology with older frameworks which we now need to adapt. So I like that we're a bit in the same boat. So we heard at the national level how they are planning to organize this, but also, as mentioned, the AI office will take up a market surveillance role. So the question is a bit, for you, how are you guys trying to manage this fast-moving digital technology? With this new role that you're having, because we see, maybe you need a lot of technical experts as well. Is this something you are addressing at the moment?
Yes. I think Peggy actually referred back to that. We have been actually hiring a lot of colleagues in recent years. So the AI office has been created, I think now 2 years ago, something like this. And we hired around, I would say, hundreds of colleagues, which were a huge part of them were actually specialists in the technologies themselves. So that's a way, and given also our governance power, notably referring back to the specific powers that relates to general purpose AI models and general purpose systems that are based on general purpose AI models, we had to actually get into the details. We also facilitate the making of the codes, the codes of practices, which were independent bodies, but still very much as well followed up by colleagues from the AI office. So yes, we have now a unit with more than 40 actually colleagues that are very much specialists in AI systems, but also in the most advanced models that actually deals with those systems. Why we did that is also because we heard from the member states that while there are expertise for very specific types of, for instance, systemic risks, that's perhaps the best place where we can centralize a bit more, because we are referring back to very small number of models of very advanced technologies. And so that's why we took initially this regulatory stance. We took this opportunity to actually increase the technical knowledge also of the AI office. So yes, we are,
Okay.
and we are still continuing to hire, but to a less extent now. We are much more stabilizing with the teams we have.
Okay. So addressing the challenges. Maybe it's a bit of a trend that we're seeing on the level of market surveillance, that certain things are now being, let's say, more ported to the European level. And I think from industry perspective, let's say our main focus is having a functioning single market at the European level. Now, my question for Daniel is from the point of view of Orgalim. This trend to do more market surveillance at the European level, is this something, let's say, which you support, where you have a positive view on, or what is your idea here?
No, very much so. I mean, there needs to be a harmonization when it comes to market surveillance on the European level, and the sheer number of packages and products that are coming into the EU markets have just exploded since the legislation was put in place. So there needs to be an adaptation to that, and I believe basically across the board, member states need more resources to deal with this, because I don't think there's any market surveillance authority at this point that are able to deal with the sheer number in a way that we think is necessary, basically, because exports both exports and imports are increasing on such a level during these years. So there needs to be an harmonization. I think also how the different market surveillance and customer authorities also deal with these checks. So certain number of checks, etc. But then you also, of course, you need the resources. And I note that the Belgian government is going to charge a cost now for all inputs, so that could then finance these checks, and that could be a way also for other member states to find financing for increased number of checks. But this is an absolutely crucial issue, because if we then are possibly good at harmonized regulation, etc., and then we also need to be sure that products that are coming in here abide by our regulation, and then customs authorities and market surveillance is absolutely crucial in securing that and in creating a level playing field for us with other competing markets. So this is absolutely one of the main points, I would say.
Yeah, it was highlighted as well in the panel before. This level playing field is also an important focus of them. So, Bianca, maybe what we've seen in the past as well within different member states as different approaches, different actions from the level of market surveillance, creating, let's say, confusion, hence not building towards a single market. From your point of view, the actions which are being taken now, will they address this, or how do you see this evolving?
Well, we hope so. I think if we do get the stop the clock, I think there's a little bit more time to get our house in order also for different member states. But we hope that the coordination that the AI board can provide at through all the different representatives from member states can provide some coordination and, exchange of best practices so that we don't end up with diverging interpretation or, gold plating somewhere or something like that. I think with other pieces of digital legislation, even landmarks like the GDPR, we've seen that there's quite often diverging interpretations between different member states. And I think it's important that for our competitiveness and indeed to ensure this level playing field across all different member states, this doesn't happen.
No. And because you referenced the AI board, is the AI office also playing a role in assuring this, let's say, harmonized implementation?
Yes. So we are basically the ones which are, together with the council presidencies, actually calling for the meetings, and we are very much looking when the high-risk AI rules will enter into application. We are very much looking at organizing as well a collective response. We also took some specific steps in order to avoid the situation that you just mentioned, Bianca, with GDPR, where actually the provider can actually decide where to go. We don't want to do that in the AI Act. We are very much open to have market surveillance authorities working on their own, but then collectively as well sharing the assessments and try to collectively come up to a collective understanding and interpretations of the rules.
Yeah. But there, I think the caveat is we still need to see how this will work in practice, I think. But it's good that it's on the radar. Okay, moving along from the more regulatory parts, I want to talk a bit about innovation. Because that's your, let's say, field of expertise, and you passionately defended the innovative approaches as well of Europe, which is good, but when I see it, I always have the reflection that there is so much going on that it's now very difficult from the perspective of a company to see what matters for me. Because you listed all the strategies. We have the factories, the gigafactories. We have the European Digital Infrastructure Consortium on AI. We have the IPCEI on AI. We have the different European Digital Innovation Hubs. So basically, for a company, I have the impression that they can't see the forest through the trees anymore. So maybe now I would like to challenge you to do sort of exercise. Imagine I'm the CEO of an SME in manufacturing, a small to medium company. At the moment, I do not yet have any experience on AI. However, my aim is to become one of the unicorns in industrial AI in Europe. What would be, let's say, the steps to take following the policy initiatives from the side of Europe?
Easy. You just go to your local European Digital Innovation Hubs.
Okay.
So basically, if you are an SME, that's really the only thing you need to know. We have this network of European Digital Innovation Hubs across Europe, 250 local one-stop shop, if I may call them that way, either, but I don't like very much because it's a too trendy term. But still, they are there. They are actually in all the regions, all the European regions, and they are there to support you throughout your digitalization, throughout the understanding of the ecosystems, but as well to support you in, for instance, looking for funding opportunities, looking for clients, and so on and so forth. So if you want to digitalize, if you want to move towards AI, that's really the place where you should go. So if I take, for instance, Belgium, we had 5, we now have 3, 1 per regions, that are actually very much working with companies on the ground. And that's what we do in every European countries. And then if, for instance, a European Digital Innovation Hubs is not specialized in your specific sectors, let's say you are an agriculture, agri-food company, there is the network. So there is most probably, and there is, I can tell you, European digital innovation hubs in France, for instance, that can directly support the specific Belgian company that is looking for information specifically to integrate in AI into its production processes. So let's avoid actually mentioning all of these initiatives. They are important, and I am actually dealing with most of them, so I am actually a huge defender of the use of each of them. But for an SME, it's just important to go to the European Digital Innovation Hubs, which then will also bring expertise on the testing experimentation facilities, where a company will be able to test, or on the regulatory sandboxes, where a company will be able to support it by a market surveillance authority, and so on and so forth. So really, just my plea, just go to your local European Digital Innovation Hub.
And it's their job to take away this complexity
Exactly.
and help you. Okay, clear message. Regarding, let's say, the innovation policy initiatives, maybe a question from your point of view and the point of view of your members. What are, let's say now, the key actions where you see a lot of momentum and enthusiasm about, Bianca?
I think in general we're very supportive of all these actions. Where we see a need is to tie infrastructure deployments like these gigafactories or the AI factories to market need and to the European potential to lead. In fact, I think we have great sectors that are quite advanced, like biotech, clean tech, and I think this is where we should be focusing our efforts to make sure that we can integrate AI and bring it to the next level. Just deploying infrastructure for infrastructure's sake might not have we'll have a great gigafactory, but maybe it will not really yield the results in competitiveness that we hope for. So it's a great ecosystem, but it needs to be clearly linked to market needs and to where we already are strong to make sure we can actually leverage all of this potential.
Yeah. So sort of focus as well, and not horizontal, everything everywhere all at once.
Exactly.
Okay. Daniel, what is from your side, let's say, something you get excited about?
No, definitely what has been mentioned with the AI network hubs and AI factories. I mean, that's very, very promising. So our members are super positive about that, and also this cross-border facilitation and to enable sort of sharing of best practices through these hubs. So we see that as a very, very positive thing and encourage the EU to do more of that. And also some of our members are also sort of contributing in spreading information about AI. One of our members, for example, gave the example that they have an AI bus that different SME companies can book, and they come and explain different AI features to them. And they thought they set this up as a thing that would run for a couple of weeks, but of course immediately the bus got overbooked, and they were looking into having several buses to get the message out to SMEs on how to use AI to increase efficiency. So that sort of initiative, I believe, really has a knock-on effect. And also we're very positive about the possibility to have sandboxes. There are a couple of examples of that, but we would like to see even more examples. I believe that's a very positive possibility to use sandboxes to develop new applications also for AI, and we would very much welcome advanced manufacturing focus. There's an example of sandboxes for that, but we would like to see even more of that.
Yeah. All right. Nice to see that companies are doing their own AI omnibuses, so it's a good initiative. Okay, as we are approaching the end of the session, normally we had a sort of statement game prepared. However, I also want to give the opportunity to people in the room, if there would be any question you want to ask to the panel. I don't know if there's a microphone to go around quickly for that. I see already a question there.
Thank you. Frédéric de Busseret from Timelix, technology lawyer in Belgium. I'd like to come back to the remark about regulatory fatigue. What we see when we assist companies in complying with the new technologies is you were talking about like harmonizing all the laws throughout Europe, but I think a problem is that the definitions in each law are not harmonized. You have, like, for instance, under the Data Act, connected products. Then under the CRA, you have product with digital elements. The definition of cloud service is different between the NIS and the Data Act and the CRA. So is the Commission paying attention to that, or are they like only focusing, like the DGUX is focusing on the Data Act and DGUI is focusing on... It takes a lot of effort for us and for the companies to just do a scoping exercise whether or not an act applies, and you have to like dissect each definition under each. And the problem is those acts apply together. The Data Act applies and the CRA applies, and in the future the Product Act. So like more careful defining terms would be very nice.
Reaction on that, Antoine Alexandre?
Yes, taxonomies is my dada, so it's really my thing. So I am the first one also to look into the details of taxonomies. So I will not speak on behalf of I will not speak because I don't know the details of specific legislation you mentioned, notably the Data Act, which is under an omnibus. But I can tell you for the cloud definition in itself, there is the upcoming Cloud and AI Development Act, which foresee as well to harmonize these specific definition. Though in the AI Act, I can tell you that we went through that very much also collectively with international partners. This way of actually trying to collaborate on a defined way of considering AI systems. For instance, AI systems is actually a work that is being handled at OECD level with a lot of third jurisdiction involved in order to have a common definition. That's one thing. Second thing, taxonomies are important for legislation. They are also important for policies more broadly. And this is something I am very much interested into. And we actually, as part of the Apply AI strategy, are launching the AI Observatory, where we want as well for policymakers within the 27 member states, but also outside, to have the common understanding of the different technologies they are talking about. So we are actually now developing this methodology of understanding, then proposing to the member states and the full commission a set of key terms when it comes to AI that should be defined in a certain way and understood in a certain way to avoid having these differences of understanding, of interpretation between different actors. So, voilà, in short.
Any reaction from your side, or fully agree with the question, I assume?
Yeah. Fully agree with the question.
I also agree with the question.
Yes.
Anyone else? One more? Not directly. Yeah, then we have maybe a couple more minutes, I think, to look towards some statements. So, to make it a bit fun, I proposed here 2 statements, and of course, always the answer is, yeah, we want everything. But now, today, you can't have everything. You need to choose something. So, round 1. In Europe, should we focus on developing our own European large language models, or focus on implementing non-European large language models with a specific creation of value? Who prefers the first one, develop our European large language models? No? No enthusiasm? So the focus is on implementing the European, non-European LLMs, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah?
To go further into the sort of vertical application, there is where you can find most efficiency gains. So if you have to make a choice, that would be, the response, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think we would need to catch up too much, and I think we should be using what we already have and leverage that.
Okay.
I think for sure I would have chosen the 2. I think the second sentence, it's really focusing on now. And that's what we are trying to achieve also in the Apply AI strategy. So basically there are already competitiveness gains that can be made. Let's use these potentially non-European models to achieve these competitiveness gains. That does not mean that we should just use all of them in a blindly manner. We should also perhaps focus on the ones which are perhaps a bit more open source, open-weighted, and so on and so forth.
Okay. Then I'll immediately skip to the final one, given we're a bit out of time. From your perspective, what is the single biggest obstacle to European competitiveness today? And there are some high-level words, of course, other, and you can choose. Anyone? One word.
Financing.
Financing, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay,
Definitely.
interesting. Yeah.
I have to go with fragmentation because somehow you can tie it to everything else. You can to fragmentation of financing. There's no 28 regime. There's not a good system for that. But there's also diverging interpretation. So it's related to regulation. So I went for the easy answer.
Okay. Antoine Alexandre.
And I would go, I think as it was understood also in my presentation, by mindset. I mean, all of the others are very important, but mindset is also something that is important, taking back control of our narrative.
Okay. Very nice, powerful words to end our panel on. So a big thank you to all three of you. And I will now give it back to Jessica, I assume, for the transfer.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for this very impressive panel, I would say. We will end with this mindset conclusion. So we are now at the last part of our session today, and I am pleased to welcome Marine Logge on stage. She is the Director General of the Quality and Safety Department in our Ministry of Economy, and she will be closing the session with a speech focusing on the position of Belgium in the AI market. So the floor is yours.
Hello. I have the unfortunate task to stand in between you and your lunch, so I will try to keep it short. I said try, I did not promise so. First of all, I would like to thank all speakers, moderators for their rich and very thoughtful exchanges. Surprised? No, but there are some great ideas that have been shared here today. And I would like to give some of my reflections on the two panels that we had. Well, first of all, I'm the Director General of Quality and Safety, but I have been a market surveillance inspector for many years. So when I saw the product safety approach, it's very familiar. I see you nodding. And it was definitely nothing new for me as a regulator and as a market surveillance inspector to see that piece of legislation. So I really welcomed that. For us, it was, as a market surveillance authority, it was a relief to see that it was harmonized, that it was similar, and that there was no fragmentation. Of course, you always have Council and European Parliament coming in who make small adjustments during the legislative process. But for market surveillance inspectors, it was a relief to see that it builds on what we already had. My department is also key because we have the single liaison office, and you had Laurent Wenquin here. And another word which was used during the panels was coordination, talking to each other. Well, definitely, this is the task of the single liaison officer. They enhance the talks between all market surveillance authorities within Belgium territory, of course. I'm only speaking for the Belgium territory. But we do act also, as we are the market surveillance authority, for machinery, PPE, toys. We also participate in ATCO meetings, administrative cooperation, at EU level. The single liaison office also participates at EU level. So if we are talking about coordination, yes, it is there. But we have a lot of questions, and I'm very pleased to hear that there are guidance documents coming on because, again, harmonization was one of the key words, and we need those guidance documents. So we have, in my department, market surveillance authorities. We do the regulations on machinery, on toys. I remember toys was discussed in 2024 in Council just after the Artificial Intelligence Act, and it was the first regulation implementing and referencing to the Artificial Intelligence Act. We had plenty of questions during the legislative process. So, where are we with the first panel? Well, they explored how AI is transforming the very nature of products that we supervise. And we do supervise the products. And it is indeed a new element. market surveillance authorities, they were used to go to physical shops to look at the products, to see if they complied with the essential health and safety requirements. Before the AI Act, we already had to switch our heads because we also had e-commerce, and like we saw here, we saw the exponential increase, and we still see the exponential increase. So as market surveillance authorities, we already had to change our old-fashioned habits, to go less to physical shops and to go more to online shops. And now we have another challenge on top of that, is the artificial intelligence requirements. We are capable of changing. We are not static products as market surveillance inspectors. We change. We go along with the changes at EU level as well. But this transformation raises indeed some questions. How can we deal with that? We were talking, or you were talking, I was not talking, you were talking about risks. I heard people referring to Monarch, to the safety gate, risk assessment. Yes, that are tools which we use to identify the risks, because as market surveillance authorities, we are obliged to take proportionate measures. I heard people saying, oh yes, we are here first to explain, to help. We are not the police department. Yes, we are market surveillance authorities, and we need indeed to explain to the SMEs, which is in our Belgian market, how they have to comply. But we also have to ensure that the products are safe for all aspects. And that's where we have to use risk assessment tools that we have or that needs to be developed. But that is what we do. And it's not easy here as well. It is indeed the manufacturer's responsibility to put safe products on the market, including for all requirements. So not only the sector-specific union harmonization legislation, but also the overall, we heard again the fragmentation. It's a huge palette of legislations, I do admit, not only for SMEs, but also for market surveillance authorities in several sectors, because we need to know the same legislations that SMEs know. So it's a challenge for both, and it's a challenge for industry. I'm looking at industry as well here. So yes, we are in it together, and we have to go through it together. And it will not be easy. On both sides, it will not be easy. As public authorities, we have budget constraints. I looked at you when you said, I was able to hire 100 people. How do you do that? Where do you get the money from? How can we achieve that? Because I'm envying you that you're able to do that. Current situation in my office, we are not really able to hire 100 people, even not a little bit less. But again, we also need to have the expertise. We have to build up all of those elements. But it's the same at the other side. So this is something that we have to go through together. So in short, the discussions from the first panel clearly showed that the rise of AI does not simply add a new layer to market surveillance, but it transforms, again, the way we were thinking. And rather than a burden, it is an opportunity for us as well to build smarter, to be more efficient if we can. So that is a little bit of reflection on the first panel. The second panel that we just had, US innovates, China replicates, EU regulates. I have to admit, I'm also president of EA, the European Corporation for Accreditation, another pillar in the conformity assessment area. And we were discussing the AI Act at international level, because our other US regions, China, Asian Pacific, they were trying to discuss our EU legislation. They wanted to understand, they wanted to know why. So you say US innovates, but they were looking with a little bit of envy to our regulation. And it's not the only one. They do the same for CBAM, for example, or CSRD. I think we should be proud of our legislation sometimes. That is a first reflection on the second panel. And then clear rules and effective enforcement creates trust. And that is what enterprises and SMEs and companies are looking for. And is market surveillance hindering it? No, I think it's an opportunity because we need to verify, we need to inspect all companies and especially those who do not comply with legislation. And if we can ensure that, then the trustworthy companies, they can do whatever they want. They are not hindered by us. But we need to be there. It's another part of the pillars that we heard from the European Commission. They left already the room. But it's also market surveillance is needed to help industry and to not hamper innovation and especially to help them have a fair competition. The speakers pointed out that the challenge is not only to multiply initiatives. We need a guidance document, especially for the SMEs. And here again, safety first or AI first. I think it's both. You mentioned AI first. I'm not agreeing. I would rather say safety first and artificial intelligence first should be going hand in hand. And the regulatory framework must remain very clear, coherent, like we heard in the definitions. It's not the first time that we as market surveillance authorities have to explain what is written in the legislation, and we do see that there is sometimes incoherence between definitions because our industry needs clarity. And I agree with that. I'm looking at you, so you mentioned it very clearly. But you also referred to the triptych. We have the AI Act, we have the strategy, we have the plan. This is what we have to work with. And many companies today face a rapidly expanding regulatory landscape. That's true, but it's not only industry, it's also the regulators. We are. So we also have to keep up with that pace. And the challenge ahead is to ensure that everybody understands the same thing, that we speak the same language. And sometimes that's also missing. We try to support innovation, also when it requires new governance tools. And one of the new tools referred to today by the person who is sitting here from Brussels was the regulatory sandboxes, I think. This is indeed something that we would love to implement. And this brings me to the position of Belgium in the evolving artificial intelligence landscape. We may not be the largest player, we are a small country, but influence is not determined by size or scale. And if we look more closely, Belgium has a number of strategic advantages that should not be underestimated. First, Belgium hosts a lot of EU institutions. If we need to talk to them, I'm not going to say to lobby, that's not the role of the market surveillance, but if we need to talk to them, if we need to help them, then they are very close by. And it's also important for us, we sometimes invite European Commission officers to our offices to show them what market surveillance is all about, because it's easy to be sitting in an office around Schuman area, but they don't know what it is to be challenged each day by industries if we go to a company saying, we are here to verify if your products are safe. So we try to have that dialogue with the European Commission. Secondly, Belgium has a strong expertise in the regulatory governance and market surveillance. The first panel referred to Regulation 765. In that time, in 2008, it was still covering market surveillance. It has been split up to 1020. But I was there more than 20 years ago when that piece of legislation was discussed. So we do have that experience for many years. We have had the market surveillance regulation, the 1020. Now we will have the new European Product Act as well. So we do have a lot of experience, but I said at the beginning of my speech, we also have to change our minds. It's about mindset. I don't know who said that at last. You did, sorry. But we also have to change our mindset because we have to be dealing with all new regulatory requirements, new tools. And this is also something I think that we are strong in because we have that experience, that build up. We also cooperate closely, Peggy left already the room, but with BPT and with other market surveillance authorities. Although we don't have in Belgium one law saying this is how market surveillance is done, I know countries where they have it, and I think it's a good case, but here we don't have that. We have our own regulatory system, but we do cooperate very well. And then finally, Belgium benefits from a wide range of research institutions, universities, and innovation actors. University and research centers are active in many areas of artificial intelligence, from machine learning to data governance and even digital ethics. And at the same time, the Belgian companies, including SMEs, are developing innovative artificial intelligence applications. Collaboration is needed throughout the whole chain. The governance requires dialogue, and I'm very happy with this week that we were able to exchange from the different angles. So dialogue is a key element in all of this. And if we look at the broader picture, one important conclusion emerges from today's discussions. The implementation of the Artificial Intelligence Act should not be seen only as a regulatory challenge. It's also a strategic opportunity. Insights shared today showed something encouraging. Across institutions and sectors, there's shared willingness to make this work. We heard that we need to communicate. We heard that we need to work together. We need to work together on build a system that protects our public interests, but still enabling innovation. And with this challenge that Belgium has, I think we can conclude, and I will not prevent you from having lunch. Again, I would like to thank you for your presence here today. I would like to wish you an excellent continuation of this week, and thank moderators, speakers, but especially also the public for showing the interest in this subject. Have a nice lunch.
Maybe some last words from my side. I will not try to summarize the session. I think Marine did that perfectly. One quote I will remember is not safety first, not AI first, but maybe safe AI first. And that will be certainly one of the primary actions and tasks of the future MSAs. So. As Marine also did, thank you to all our speakers and participants today. If you still have questions, don't hesitate to approach the speakers, approach us, not only today, but maybe other days as well, as the AI week is until Friday. So yes, have a great rest of the week. I hope you have some new insights from this session, and thank you all.